For those of you that don't know me, my name's James Ski, and about a year ago now, I was working for LinkedIn, and it had occurred for me for a very, very long time that there really wasn't a network dedicated in the UK for those in the SaaS industry that are aspiring to grow revenues as a founder, sales leader, or individual contributor. So when I started out my SaaS sales career at a British tech company called Huddle, many years ago now, it was really interesting to me how many SaaS tools that we were using, tools like Salesforce, Gainsight, Tout app, a whole range of SaaS tools, and they were all American-based companies, many of which we work for. DocuSign as well, I use that as well. And at the time, I was reading TechCrunch a lot, and I realized that there's a phenomenal amount of information coming out of San Francisco in the US, but not enough about kind of UK-centric information for sales leaders in particular. And fundamentally, as much as we love the VCs, and there are fewer in the room, and of course, these companies wouldn't get started without founders, sales leaders are driving the business, and we carry a lot of pressure. And in fact, today, I imagine, being end of quarter, a few of you still might have that pressure over your heads. I'm really grateful for everybody making the effort. I appreciate the venue's kind of off the beaten track, but it is the home of the London Olympics, so hopefully that should inspire you. Just to raise a hand, how many of you came to the very first Sales Confidence event? Okay, cool. So we're expanding. Who has been to a Sales Confidence event prior to this? Okay, good news. One of the things that we're known for at the events is that we like to be on time. We failed that today, but we will keep on schedule for the rest of the day, and the speakers are here to deliver actionable insights that you can take back into your business tomorrow. We don't have any presentation slides, so they're up here on stage, well prepared to deliver insights that you can take back to your business. The next point is, I appreciate there's a lot of us in here trying to sell something. Just be very wary that this is an industry event, and be thoughtful in those conversations that you're having. This is really not a pitch off. This is actually about getting advice and insights from each other. So feel free to flag anyone that seems to be overstepping the pitching mark to me. I'll try and lead the way with pitches. So if I set the tone, then maybe we can dial it down a little bit. Just to let you know, there will be breaks, there'll be plenty of drink, there will be lunch where we're a bit on a spread for you, and in the evening, just downstairs, we've got an after-party venue, and we've got a free bar and free pizza. If you want to invite some friends down for the evening, feel free to do it, it'll be sunny. So let's kick this show off. So our first speakers, I'm really excited to invite up onto the stage. One of the individuals, Chris Tottman of Notion Capital, come on up. Can we get a mic, please? Was very kind to support me from my very first LinkedIn post when I said, I'm going to put this network together. And because he's on LinkedIn more than I am, it was probably like 6 a.m., he picked that up, and that gave me some initial momentum for our first event. Our next guest, I'm really excited to invite, is Laurence, now CRO of Pipedrive, and I had the pleasure of working with her at LinkedIn. So if we can take a seat. Morning. Thank you all. Are our mics on? We good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hello.
cool. Just so we can break the ice, Chris, maybe if you can just give a little introduction, very brief, who you are, but also why you decided to support Sales Confidence early on.
So I am a tech founder. I'm a linky brain. Built technology companies and sold them. Founded Notion after the sale of Message Labs, which was a Generation 1 SaaS business. We went to 0 to 150 million in SaaS in 8 years, sold it to Symantec. So we have about 50 SaaS businesses in the portfolio. And my original career was in sales. So, there isn't anything that I don't love more than an amazing salesperson or a sales leader, because it's the sort of womb that I was born into from a career perspective. So,
fantastic. Laurence?
Hi. I was not born in sales. I was born in France, but you probably guessed it. I spent most of my career in marketing. I spent 7 years at LinkedIn, which I witnessed growing from 7 employees to 10,000. And I joined Pipedrive almost a year ago. Pipedrive is a sales CRM company, for those who don't know us. And we have an interesting story because we were founded in Estonia exactly 8 years ago. Today is the birthday, the 8th birthday. And then we expanded, and we now have offices in New York, London, and Lisbon. And I head the sales and marketing team, so now I have a foot in sales.
Fantastic. We welcome you on board warmly. So we've been having a lot of discussions in the build-up to this event. And today we're going to be hearing from sales leaders from hypergrowth companies, but also early stage. And there's also some key themes around diversity that are particularly important within the software industry. Something that's been quite topical, and particularly, I guess, from your portfolio fishing perspective, Chris, is those early stage companies, those that are essentially kind of seed stage, and they are targeted to raise further rounds from aggressively trying to chase that first 10 million. What's kind of some of your experiences in that early stage?
Well, everything that we invest in is in that valley of death, as I call it. So the sort of escape velocity for a founder and a startup is really $10 million of our added or revenue. So that's where we live. We live in that valley of death. We spend all of our time looking for, unusual aspects that are going on in the market, incredible founders or uncompromising founders or unusual founders, mission-driven founders, things like that. Early on, so the closer, for this sort of audience, I think some of the things that you have to think about might be around like the kind of career decisions that you make, more than what I might invest in. I think we might talk about that a little bit later. But obviously, the closer you get to zero revenue, the more of a risk premium you have to put onto the career investment that you're about to make. And the closer that you get to 10 million, you can ease up on the risk premium that you're going to apply. And that also means that you might get more stock early on, and it might mean that you get less stock later on. But the advice that I typically give is that it's a math problem to start with. We see 2,500 companies to make 25 bets in a fund. And venture capitalists typically, if you think of us as a market aggregator, there's a bunch of us that are making those bets. So we don't see all of the best things, for example. And you might have your commission plan mucked about with get angry, speak to 6 companies and choose one. That math will not work statistically. You're more likely to lose 2 or 3 years of your career if that's the approach that you take. So the first thing is there's a higher risk premium the earlier it is. There's less of a risk premium later on. You need to think about it strategically. You need to really think about the market that they're operating in, the quality of the founder, the speed to value that the customer is extracting for the product that they're buying. And if you start to think about those things and you start to think about that, over a number of years, then you'll start to improve the odds that you're going to join a rocket ship and, ride all the way. So that's what I would say.
How, thinking about the early stage that you joined LinkedIn, it still was fairly well established, at least in the US market. What are some of the things that particularly salespeople should think about when joining a tech company, from that stage of growth? And do you see a difference now? There's so many sales tools, there's so many marketing tools available. Do you see the difference in the profile of salespeople?
So to your point, when I joined LinkedIn, it was pretty well established. What was interesting is that I joined LinkedIn just after they launched the talent solution side, which was a bet. Like at some point they were okay. Like we have an advertising business, it's working well. Like shall we do that? It ended up being like almost 80% of the revenue, so that was a good bet. But the sales process were like pretty well established. It was a completely different story when I joined Pipedrive. First, because there is a major difference between the target audience. Pipedrive is addressing SMBs and startups, where LinkedIn is enterprise sales. So like it's SMB sales versus enterprise sales. And the big revelation for me was the speed, like the velocity, because at Pipedrive you have to look at your numbers like literally like every day and even like by the hour. Like by noon I will know if it's a good or a bad day, which was not the case at LinkedIn. I mean the pace was like far slower and so you have to correct the trajectory like far faster in a business like Pipedrive. The challenge is that if you're too obsessed with the finish line and you don't think of like your pipeline, you're probably going to get it wrong. Well, like we discussed the fundamentals of selling, and I don't think that those fundamentals are changing. It's still about establishing a relationship with your customers. You have to have this good blend of leadership, emotional intelligence, drive, expertise of your product, your market. But then there is a lot about the discipline. I think that more than ever, because buyers are more informed, they are more demanding, because the growth is more elusive. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Like we had, for instance, Brazil is our second largest market. They've been struck by a big strike with truck drivers, and it hits the economy, and suddenly all your numbers like turn to red. So that's why it's so important that you reverse engineer your sales process and you start like really thinking of your pipeline and what drive your leads from a stage to another.
When these early stage businesses are coming to pitch you, Chris, do you have a preference over those that are going after the price deals, and kind of what size is that to you versus those that are doing more high volume S&B type deals?
Well, the VC market tends to break out between, you've got generalists that will invest in anything, and you've got those that are relatively agnostic in stage. But for us as a specialist in B2B only, then we tend to look at our portfolio. It tends to be far more enterprise. And if you look at the kind of history of enterprise sales, then those that scale very, very rapidly tend to have enough CAC that they can spend on a sales force. So if the average order value is north of $20,000, then typically you can plug into an existing market and you can acquire talent, leaders, and so on and so on. And they can understand how to scale those models. At the other end, you get the viral coefficient models, for example, and in Europe, you'd have people like Point9 that are more specialist in those kind of areas. Now, in Message Labs, we got 20,000 corporates, so we had like £1 million contracts, but our average contract was like 3,000. So we weren't viral coefficient, but we managed to scale very, very rapidly. So there are a bunch of vendors that are out there that are between the viral coefficient and the 20,000 for enterprise. But again, you have to look for those as Triptease, for example. I think Pipedrive is probably less than 20,000. Yeah, and so they do now exist. There's probably about half a decade's worth of people and talent and leaders that are out there. But it's really about velocity, the ability to have very, very smart people that are able to run sales cycles super fast and do volumes of deals.
And what about actually the experience of sales leaders in the market? Especially at the early stage, one of the things that I've observed a lot, there's well-established US enterprise tech companies with bases here that can offer huge compensation packages, lots of benefits, and it's really hard to make that decision going back to early stage, to the points that you made earlier. Do you see a challenge around that?
I'm going to re-ask that. So why did you join Pipedrive?
So I love telling that story. So I was approached to join Pipedrive, and my first reaction was like, CRM? No way. After working for LinkedIn, who find jobs for people, transform lives, that didn't seem like a great purpose. But then they explained what the product did, and this this notion of activity-based selling, this single view of the pipeline, very simple and intuitive tool that the salespeople can use like on a day-to-day basis. And I was literally sitting among sales at LinkedIn, and I started to look around me, and I could see that despite the fact that we use a very well-known CRM platform, everybody was drawing their pipeline on whiteboards. And I knew, because at that time I was in charge of marketing and we looked carefully at attribution forecasting, that everybody was doing their forecast on Excel. So I say, okay, they have something. And so then I met the team. I love the founders. I love the people I met. And also the fact that it's, the mission is really like, we say that we're here to make salespeople unstoppable, but it's also like we want to make small people become big. So this focus on SMB and startup, that was very very interesting, because that's the heart of the economy. So yes, I took a hit on my salary, like I made a sacrifice, but a fast scaling business, we're actually above 20, we're like, but I can't.
On the up.
Yeah, I can't communicate about it. Like the stage, also the leeway. You're here to build, so it's a great challenge.
Fantastic. Something to add? Go on.
Yeah, I think if you just pick up some of the words Laurence is using, is so the purpose, love, chemistry with founders, grow. So people that join early stage businesses, their frame of reference of what they're analyzing is not the same as when you're starting in your career and you're thinking, I need to get a job, I need to turn my attributes into skills, I need to build a brand and a network, I need to get paid more so that I can move into the flat. Those survival levels of Maslow's hierarchy, start to go away, and now it's much more around purpose, chemistry, building, unfinished business, the ability to transform an industry. Those are the things that drive people to do that. They know what their street value is, but they don't take their street value. They're more interested in the ability to create something. And so it's kind of a different type of individual that you're going to be hiring.
Brilliant. And I think it'd be interesting as we listen to more of the speakers today, some of those insights and some of the things you should have in your mind about when you're identifying the kind of growth stages of a company that I think we just generally should be thinking deeper about. So kind of moving the discussion on a little bit, one of the challenges, and to be honest, I became much more aware of this joining LinkedIn, was something around diversity and belonging. And actually, Chris, who I've got to know quite well recently, has set out his own vision around this, around a pledge that I'll get him to go into more detail around. But ultimately, I can tell you that this pledge has been hard to achieve because we didn't quite hit the mark in our first year at this conference. Maybe you can share a little bit more about kind of the pledge, but also your other thinking around this space.
I've got a daughter who's 21. She's just finished university at Exeter, called Daisy. So she's done an English degree. So the last 3 or 4 years have been very topical as a female in that environment, thinking about all of the things that women go through in the world. So I've got WhatsApp channel going throughout the night about bang, bang, anger, and this, that, and the other. And so that was really interesting. I work in an industry where only 7% of the people that write checks out are women, and only 2% of the money that gets invested goes to female founders. We're meant to be the masters of the universe, apparently. What the fuck's that all about? That doesn't seem to make any sense. And I also come from a sales background, so when this Linky Brains thing kicked off, my echo chamber, the audience that was responding was 80% male. And you can't create a movement that is 80% male. It doesn't make any sense. So I immediately had something that was completely fresh that I was creating, where I'd realized that if I didn't change the audience, it would be a problem. So those three things converged. And as I said, I come from the sales room. So you can get very, very angry, but you can't change the lag indicators of 2% of the checks and 7% of the check writers by getting angry about that data point. You've got a funnel issue, So I thought, unless you change the audience and unless you change the pipeline activities that engage and drive that audience, then you can be as angry as you like, but that needle's going to move very, very, very slowly. So 50-50 pledge is really around focusing all of the activities that you do from a pipeline perspective being gender equal, and that's not just the speakers, it's to do with the audience. And those simple changes mean that people learn very, very, very quickly across the gender divide. And And so it's a real rich experience for those people that participate that I'm finding. Your audience changes. If every VC invested in a gender diverse way, they would 2x their return. I mean, that's the statistic. So if you don't see enough women, you invested 1% of what you see. If you don't see the women, you don't invest. I actually invest 2x in terms of the women that I see. I just don't see enough of them. So I have an audience problem, I have a pipeline problem. So that's what the 50-50 pledge is all about. It's, it's something that I'm very passionate about. I think it might be maybe the most meaningful thing I'll have ever done. So.
Yeah, and just on that, we are kind of, it's a 70-30 split at this event. So for next year, we're aiming for the 50-50. So spread the word. Laurence, do you just have a final point before we move on to our next speaker?
Yeah, first, music to my ear. Not only because I'm a woman, but I love, the fact that you bring this idea of it's not about if you're just obsessed with the final result or the quota, you're never going to make it. It's really about managing a pipeline. Just a quick anecdote. I was really spoiled at LinkedIn because LinkedIn really took a stand and worked a lot on diversity. Pipedrive raised actually did a round of funding last week. So we are very fortunate. And it gave me the opportunity to wander the VC worlds for the last 6 months. And in 6 months, I haven't seen any single woman. It's even I don't know if you saw the movie Walter Mitty, where you have this bunch of consultants coming and they are all dressed the same with the beard and the gilet. That was exactly that. Every time I would go to a VC, I had those clones. Same age, same dress code, and I was the only woman. So, there is still a lot of things that we can do in that area.
Fantastic. Chris, do you want a final word?
We'll have a lot of fun changing. It's back to mobilizing. One of the European problems is that we're fragmented, and it's very difficult to mobilize all of the pieces that are required to outperform other areas, whether that's in verticals or segments or globally and so on and so forth. And it's the same. You need the creators, you need the money, and you need the scalers. Everyone in this room fits in part of that Venn diagram or one piece of that Venn diagram. So everyone's got a bit to play. So it's simply, if we can have a lot of fun and we can mobilize people, then we can move trillions of dollars to the right place.
Brilliant. Well, let's have a round of applause for our guests and speakers.